Military Seahawk Podcast.
Welcome to the Military Seahawk Podcast. I'm Melanie Nelson, the Military Student Services Specialist at UNCW, and today I'm interviewing James McNeil. James is a student veteran, a senior in the Cameron School of Business, already running his own business, and he's a motivational speaker. Plus, he always has jokes. That's what I know about him so far. But on today's episode, we're going to find out more. Hi, James.
Hi there. Always has jokes. No pressure. None at all.
No pressure. You don't have to tell jokes during the whole podcast. The occasional joke would be appreciated.
I can do that.
All right. So we are going to get started right away. When you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
When I was a kid, I wanted to be a lawyer. I took an aptitude test in middle school, and it said your best job would be a lawyer. I think they knew I was a bit argumentative at that time, but that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a lawyer.
You wanted to be a lawyer. Did that change at all as you grew older?
It most definitely did. I realized how much school I would have to take to be a lawyer. And as a middle schooler, it did not look appealing at all.
Fancy that. You're sitting in middle school and you're like, another how many years of this? I don't think so. Not for me.
Pretty much. I looked at the years of school I have to go through and said, no, once I get through high school, that's enough.
Okay. So how did you decide to go into the military?
Well, that has its own story. After high school, I had started working in factories, and I worked in various factories for about eight and a half years. I said, there's got to be more to life than this. So I went to talk to first a Marine recruiter, and then one day the Army recruiter intercepted me and said, we can offer you the job you want. We can put you into a field you want to go into the job you want. And I said, that sounds good. So I took my testing and went to basic training from there.
Okay. What area of the country were you in when you were working in factories?
I grew up in the mountains of North Carolina, so that's where I was living at that time as well.
Okay. So you were meeting with a recruiter in your local hometown there?
Yes.
Okay. And the Army said, I can give you the job you want. What was that job?
At that point, I had no idea. I just wanted something different than working in a factory. I talked to the recruiter about his field, which was aviation. And he was, if I remember correctly, he was a crew chief on one of the helicopters. And not surprisingly, that's the field I chose to go into, is aviation. I think he was a little proud.
He was probably delighted with himself that he said, I can give you the job you want. And you're like, what is that? I don't know what I want. I just want it to be other than what I'm doing currently.
Correct.
You were a recruiter's happiest moment, having you walk in and say, I can mold this young one in the direction that I want him to go.
Oh, yes. He saw me coming from a mile away.
Out of curiosity, what were the Marines promising you?
Nothing.
Nothing. Like nothing, or like you can be a Marine?
Pretty much that was it. You can be a Marine, and they hadn't gone beyond to any promises. I took the ASVAB, or the practice ASVAB, in the recruiter's office, and his eyes lit up when he saw my score. I can't remember what it was, but I do remember that I went from a call a week to a call a day after that.
Oh, you increased in importance in his eyes.
And then he did not like it one bit when I chose the Army over the Marines.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you kind of crushed his dreams there. Or at least his quota for the month.
Something like that.
Okay, so the Marines have been deprived of someone who could have been an excellent Marine. However, you went into the Army.
Yes.
And so tell me again, what was your job? And tell me a little bit more about your job in the Army.
Initially, I was an aircraft electrician. I worked on the electrical systems of everything the Army had except the Apache. The Apache had its own crew members, its own workforce that just worked on the Apache. Mostly I worked with batteries and other electric devices lights, signal lights, things like that. And then in 2002, I was injured and I had to change to another job. And I stayed in aviation and I went to operations, working with the pilots to keep their flight plans where they need to be, hours, make sure the aircraft is taken care of, the pilots are taken care of, things like that.
So from maintenance and doing a lot of work with your hands, it sounds like,
yes,
to kind of doing more of the paperwork and the computer work and making sure that everything lines up.
Yes. And I would say I enjoyed it. And there were days I did enjoy it, but there were days I wondered why I did this.
That is a commonality to many people's military careers and the stories of how they got started in their jobs. On the one hand, it has its moments, and then the other times you're like, why am I doing this to myself?
Pretty much.
So which would you say you had more of an aptitude for, generally speaking, the part where you were working with batteries or the part where you were doing operational logistics types of things?
When I first started working with logistics, it took me a little bit to get used to it, but once I got my feet under me and was able to work it, I did a lot better with the logistics side of it than I did working with my hands. I did well working with my hands, but I did a lot better on the logistics side.
Yeah. So you're becoming a well-rounded person during your time in the Army is what it sounds like.
That's one way to put it, yes.
What's another way to put it?
Well, I think well-rounded, I think what I look like now, but that's a different story.
He's rubbing his belly right now, for those of you who can't see him, which is everybody on our podcast audience.
Pretty much.
Okay, so what did you like about your job in the Army, either one of those two jobs? What did you like?
Well, both of them had the stability and the understanding that I would know what I was doing from day to day.
Yeah.
It wasn't, I knew I was doing this exact job from day to day, but I knew I was going to either go to work in the electric shop, I was going to work on a helicopter somehow, some way, or I'd be working with a pilot or taking care of an issue with the pilots or the aircraft. There wasn't, oh yes, today we're going to go off and do this that I've never trained for. It was always within what I was trained for.
Yeah, it was always within reach. That mission was always something that you could do. And there's a lot of satisfaction in walking into work and thinking, I can do this today.
Exactly. Sometimes it required me to stretch a little bit, but it was always within a reach that I could actually get to.
When I was interviewing for this job, I was asked, what do you need to keep coming to work every day? And I said, I need problems that are solvable. Like, it's a problem, and I will enjoy working through it. But at the end of the day, there is a resolution. It's not something that we're going to let drift away into the ether. There's always something that can be done, and I will do it.
Exactly. And that explains what I loved about the military. There were problems. There were always problems. Life has problems. But it wasn't problems that were above my head that I could not solve. They might have required work, and many times they did require work, but I could solve the problems.
Yeah. And I like what you point out, too, that the Army gave you what you needed in terms of training. Sometimes it was on-the-job training where you were learning how to solve the problem by solving it. But for the most part, you were they gave you the platform to understand and people to help you understand how to do the maintenance or how to set up the paperwork, whatever.
Exactly.
And it was achievable.
Exactly. The problems were never out there where I couldn't achieve them.
Yeah, so there was a lot of satisfaction in that. And I think sometimes that's something that's missing when people look at veterans is like, we went from a place where we accomplished a lot and we did a lot of things day to day to day. It just doesn't look like what you're used to accomplishing in your field.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So was there anything you didn't like about your job or about being in the Army in general?
When I was working with the pilots and working as an operations person, we did a lot of what we call the dog and pony shows. Everything had to look perfect. Everything had to appear to be perfect, and we would have dignitaries come to visit. And we would look at things that really didn't matter, such as the uniform in Iraq. we're here in combat, we don't care what the uniform looks like, but apparently someone does. Things like that, I just call it stupid stuff. Every job has it. The Army did too.
Dog and pony shows are just part of the military tradition, I feel like. No matter the branch of service, no matter your role within that branch, you're going to participate in a dog and pony show. Dog and pony shows have literally caused me to become faint because we had to get there so early that I missed lunch and I passed out and it was not pleasant. Dog and pony shows cause harm, but we continue doing them. It's terrible.
And no one understands why, but we continue doing them.
And yet we continue. So, funny story. Our first episode of this podcast, we interviewed a retired brigadier general because I refused to participate in dog and pony shows anymore. And I was like, if we're going to have somebody high up coming to visit, I'm going to put him to work. And I put him and made him interview for the podcast.
Excellent. And I remember that podcast.
Yes. It's one of the things I'm quite proud of, that I was able to avoid the dog and pony show in that way. Fair warning to anybody else out there, I will not participate.
And for those who do not know what a dog and pony show is, because we've used that terminology a lot, it's where things are made to look perfect for a visiting dignitary, and everyone is on their quote-unquote best behavior, and it's just not the way things normally are. That's the idea behind a dog and pony show, and that's why we hate them so much. Just be you.
Yes, we would much rather show up and show you the way that things actually work around here than have to put a lot of spit and polish on things and make it look
Most
shiny.
definitely.
Yeah, I hear you. Nobody likes to be asked to be fake at work, to not be yourself. So that is frustrating when you're in the military. What is the coolest thing you ever did in the Army?
The coolest thing I ever did, I was driving with the colonel. I took him to his aircraft in Iraq. And on the way, he stopped and pointed out this building. He said, I want you to come right back here, point this toward the building. It was about 100 to 150 yards away, and watch what we do to it. And the building had been cleared. There was no one in it. We knew that for sure. And 4 Apaches came over top of me, almost exactly over me, and lit that building up. It was gone by the time they were done.
And by lit it up, you mean?
They shot so much ammo into that thing, I don't think they had any left.
Do you think that was maybe the goal? Were they trying to offload some ammo for some logistical reason?
He wouldn't tell me why they were doing it, and I did not need to know. I just knew it was cool.
Yes. He gave you just a fun entertainment moment in the midst of your deployment.
Yes. And that was my task, to watch them destroy that building.
And it felt pretty good.
It was an amazing task. It was one of my favorites.
Yes, that is a cool thing. I think that is, regardless of the reasons behind it, we will never know why they needed to dump all that ammo. But they did, and it made an explosion, and that was kind of cool.
Yes.
Yeah, we like to blow things up in the military.
Yes, we do.
We just do. I'm just going to say it. All right, so let's talk a little bit about deployment. You've mentioned Iraq a few times.
Yes. I did deploy in 2003 to Iraq with the 101st Division. I often tell people I'm not a hero. I didn't want to go. I went. It was my job. I went. Not really a lot to say about it. I mean, there's a few high spots like what I just told you about. There's a lot of low spots that we're not going to talk about. But it was a deployment. I went there in February of 2003. I came back in December of 2003 to have surgery. And that was pretty much it.
Been there, done that, got the t-shirt. Did you get a t-shirt?
They didn't even give me a t-shirt.
You didn't even get a t-shirt. Those are the best parts of deployment. It's like I did this. I was there. Oh.
They gave me a couple of push-ups to do when I got back. That was pretty much it.
Yeah, they've always got a pleasant surprise for you.
I was with the 101st Division. They didn't give stuff away.
Fair enough. So, is there a habit or a mindset that you've carried from the military into your life as a veteran?
I hate being late. I hate being late with such a passion. I will get somewhere very early to avoid being late. For example, I get to college on days I have class, usually around 7 o'clock. It's not just for the good parking. I hate being late. I also tend to keep time in a military fashion, 1300, 1400 instead of 1 and 2 p.m. And yes, it drives people crazy.
But it makes so much more sense, logically, to call the 24 hours of the day the 24 hours of the day.
It makes sense to you and me, but unfortunately not to a lot of people. So there's time translating that is entertaining all the time.
Yes. So how do you feel about other people being late?
Other people being late doesn't bother me as much as me being late.
Okay.
I can't stand me being late. If you're late, oh well. I can't stand being late. If you make me late, that's a problem.
I think that's pretty healthy, though, having this habit that, like, it serves you to get places early. Get, like you said, you get the good student parking when you show up on campus early, and you're never late for class, and you're never rude to your group members for showing up late and all those things. But it is healthy not to be too concerned about whether other people are showing up late, because you know that you can't control them, and it sounds like you've adopted that.
It's not worth it. If they want to be late, it's their grades, not mine.
There you go. That's a very positive attitude to have. So, on the flip side, is there a military habit that you were glad to drop when leaving the military?
In the military, when you walk into a building, you instantly take your hat off. When you walk out of a building, you instantly put your hat on. I hated it. I hated it with a passion. Sometimes I'll wear my hat inside now just because I can. Sometimes I'll put my hands in my pockets now just because I can.
Amen, brother.
The uniform and the wear of it just drove me crazy. Why can't I have my hands in my pockets? No one ever answered that question. They just told me that if I had my hands in my pockets, I was doing push-ups. I walk around with my hands in my pockets now. I don't care.
Uniforms in the military were made for putting your hands in the pockets. They're these great, big, deep pockets that can hold all kinds of things, including my hands. And I was always cold on the ship, so I always had my hands in my pockets. And I just sort of accepted at one point, like, I rebel in very few ways. This is one of the ways in which I am going to rebel.
See, now you're just making sense. You can't do that.
I know. Well, I mean, how dare I try to make sense within the military establishment? So it doesn't bother you at all having a hat on inside a building now?
Depends. Most of the time I'd say no.
Interesting. It is. It's such a habit, and then I never wear hats anymore. Part of that is, like, I'm a woman, so I don't need hats.
I'm also bald, so it's usually a service to other people, especially on sunny days, because this is a reflective surface. You're welcome.
I didn't want to mention that he was bald. He did it for me, so it's all good. But really, it's a service to yourself. You're covering that up so you don't get sunburned. It's important. Interesting. So just wearing a uniform. Some people really kind of miss wearing a uniform when they get out of the service, because now you have to think all the time about what you're going to wear today. But it sounds like you're like, no, I'm good. I'll adopt my own style. Thanks.
Pretty much, I've adopted my own style.
Very good. So, what are you studying at UNCW?
I am studying business administration with a concentration in management and leadership.
Break that down for me. What does that look like?
Mostly we're looking at the ways that managers interact with people, with their employees, and then the leadership side of it is something that I've been studying for 20 years. I joined the Army 20 years ago, which means if I hadn't been discharged, I could be getting retired right about now, but that's another story.
Not that we're bitter.
No, not a bit. But the leadership is influence. And the way you influence people to do things is the way you lead them. Management, you manage things, you lead people, so you have both of those working together. So classes like human resource management, organizational behavior, you have the capstone course, which is next semester, which takes everything we've learned up to this point and brings it all together with the way a manager acts and the way a leader acts.
Okay. And I imagine that a lot of your military experience comes out in class discussions all the time.
I hold it back some because people do get tired of it, but I do interject a military experience. I've worked for some of the best leaders in the world. I worked with General Petraeus. I worked with General Cody, who was before General Petraeus. I worked with some of the worst leaders in the world in the Army. I'm not going to name names on that one to protect the stupid, but I'm going to say that I've worked with a wide variety from extremely great to horrible leaders, and I've learned from all of them.
Yeah, you can definitely learn from the really good ones and from the really bad ones. How do the other students in your classes, you said that sometimes they get tired of hearing it. I imagine that they get tired of hearing everybody after a while because you've all been in classes together for so long. Have there ever been any times when you've brought up a story and somebody's like, but I don't really get what you're saying, like they needed more context for the story?
It does happen from time to time. We need to understand how these stories fit in with real life. Because we can say military is real life, and it is to us, but for someone who hasn't been there, they don't get how those tie in. So sometimes the challenge is to get those to tie in.
Yeah, I find that when I'm in a job interview, they'll always ask you a situational question. Here is the situation and how would you handle it? How have you handled this situation in your past? And of course, the examples that crop up right away are the ones from my very early formative experiences in the professional working world, which were in the military. And then I'll sometimes get tripped up over trying to give enough context that I could tell them why this is important and how it is relevant and related to what we're talking about without spending 3 hours trying to describe all the working dynamics of this situation.
It is a very delicate line that we walk to explain these things.
And that's hard, I think. Sometimes people don't realize they'll look at you and they'll say, well, he doesn't talk much about his veteran experiences or something. And they'll sort of paint that color on you, but really it's that we know that it is delicate and it is hard to describe what our lives were like and to give you a specific example without having it laid out very carefully as though we were writing it for a memoir and it's very tightly controlled narrative.
Exactly.
We don't walk around with those in our heads all the time. So I think it's just this added layer of stress sometimes when you're a student and you're trying to participate even in an online discussion board where you can plan it out really carefully. Sometimes it's not worth it to go into that experience.
It is. And someone today was asking me about one of my favorite books, and it's Everyone Communicates, Few Connect by John Maxwell. And what he was talking about with connecting with people, you really have to understand their language and speak in a way that speaks to them. And that's what I try to do whenever I relay military experience, is I try to speak in a way that speaks to the person I'm talking to. If they don't understand military lingo, I'm not going to use it. But I get around veterans, and the military lingo comes out. So it's speaking to the person so that they understand. Because if you're not speaking to be understood, are you really communicating? If you're not trying to be understood, are you really communicating? Or connecting, which is the next step.
I think sometimes to student veterans, we it is possible to give up on that and to stop trying to connect beyond a surface level because it is so much harder. It is a lot harder to gauge your audience that quickly and that easily, and it takes a lot of practice, and it's so easy to get burned early on in your college career. And then by the time you're in the senior level classes, you're like, I know how to play this game. I just don't say anything about my experiences. And that can be, then you're not bringing your whole self. Again, you're being a little bit fake almost, and that doesn't feel good.
You're holding back, and it doesn't add to the class. And you actually, the other people that could learn from what you have to share aren't getting what they could learn. So again, it's a like we said, it's a delicate line that we walk, but we also don't want to overshare to the point this one time when I was shut up.
We all have those moments when we are telling our stories, our favorite stories, and we're going on and on and on, and we just need a friend to reach out and be like, buddy, it's time. Stop telling that story.
I've never done that before.
I don't resemble those remarks at all. Okay, so you are studying business at UNCW. And interestingly, you already have your own business.
Yes.
Is this the first time you've run your own business?
No, I have run businesses before. They haven't always done well, but I've learned. I've operated a marketing business before. I've actually operated the same kind of business I'm running now, which is T-shirts. I've operated that kind of business before. I've had moderate success, but it didn't last very long. I'm learning from my mistakes now. I have excellent mentors that work with me, and it's been a lot of fun figuring out what I can do better while I'm doing it.
If I recall correctly, you once told me that you have like 6 mentors. Is that true?
I have 6 mentors, yes.
Okay, let's talk about that a little bit, because I thought that a mentor was like you have one person or maybe 2 people in different areas of your life who are kind of like coaching you, and they're very invested in your success as a person and like all these things. You have 6 people who are that invested in you?
And we're invested in each other, yes. I'll talk about 2 of them. One, his name is Sean. Sean is currently in the Air Force. He is a motivational speaker. He's an excellent speaker. He helps businesses to not only get off the ground, but to thrive. Sean is a man that has helped quite a bit. Another one is Rob. Rob is, we're just getting started on this journey as far as the mentor type relationship, but he gives a lot of good information out too. Those 2 help me as far as the business side and the speaking side. Also, as far as the speaking side, there's Craig Valentine, who is the 1999 world champion of public speaking.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, there is a world championship of public speaking. Most people don't realize that, but if you Google World Championship of Public Speaking after this podcast, and you will see the list of world champions. One of my goals is to add my name to that list.
It's good to have goals, James.
It's good to have goals.
Especially lofty ones.
Well, when I get a lofty goal, I'll let you know.
Okay. So you have lots of mentors, and that seems to work well for you.
It does. Mentors in different areas of my life. Spirituality, familial, and then business are the 3 biggest ones.
Are any of your mentors veterans?
Most.
Most.
Most of my mentors are veterans. Sean is current Air Force. Rob is a veteran. And the only one that I know of that isn't is Craig Valentine, who is, again, a world champion. So I think he qualifies.
So we can qualify him even without the veteran background.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think you had mentioned that one of them was in the Air Force, so sorry for not listening. Let's talk a little bit about, you're running a T-shirt business, and I have seen you wear these T-shirts. The business is called The Inspirational Connection. This is not an advertisement for the business, but we're going to talk about it because James makes these T-shirts, and they're very striking T-shirts. They're very simple, and you have, correct me if I'm wrong, you have 2 that I'm thinking of that have a series of words on them. One says, "My story is not over yet."
Correct.
And the other says, "Your story is not over yet."
Yes. And those have a personal connection for me. We had talked a lot about the fact that I am a 2-time suicide survivor. I don't go into what happened, but suffice to say, I was at 2 points in my life, I was with the mentality of the world would be better off without me, and I tried. Thankfully, I did not succeed. Earlier this year, I got a tattoo on my right arm, which is exactly where a soldier's combat patch would be, and it is a semicolon with the camo pattern in the semicolon. Now, if you don't know what the semicolon means, semicolon is a symbol of suicide awareness, and it says that my story is not over. A writer will put a semicolon in a sentence whenever he's not done with that sentence, he wants to continue writing. That's the semicolon for me. These T-shirts, one says, "My story is not over yet." My declaration, my story is not over. I'm going to continue. What's got me down in the past is not going to keep me down. The other one is your story is not over yet. That's my favorite shirt that I have designed because I've had so many people come up to me and say, thank you for that message. How can I get a shirt like that? Being a suicide survivor, I know what it's like. And if you're listening and you've contemplated that, I'm going to talk to you directly right now. Your story is not over. You do not have to succumb to this. I'm not telling you to go buy a t-shirt. That'd be great, whatever. The big thing is that you fight this and you remember that your story is not over. I have beaten suicide. It has been 2 years since I've had a suicidal thought. 2 years. In 2 years, I've been able to overcome this, and day by day, I have not had to deal with this. There is really nothing special about me that's not also special about you. You can do this too. So that's the story behind the t-shirts of my story and your story is not over. The t-shirts have a semicolon on the right arm, which is exactly where mine is or my tattoo is. I put that there as kind of a way to connect us. When you buy the t-shirt, you're buying into that vision of, I'm going to help people to overcome this.
And that right there, everybody, is why James McNeil is a motivational speaker, just to be clear. So what I love about both of those t-shirts, and I think you almost need to buy, you almost need to have both of them, right? There are those days when you wake up and it's like, I need to remind myself, my story is not over yet.
Yes.
I'm going to get up and keep going and keep doing this.
Yes.
And then there are the days when you're a little bit stronger, when you can look at somebody else and say, hey, your story is not over yet.
Correct. And that's the reason that I designed both of those. There are days that I do want to just stay in bed. We have those days. You wake up and you start wondering, can I just skip today? Just lay back down? And those days are natural. Those days are the days you say to yourself, my story is not over yet. And then, like you said, there's days you can convey that to someone else. I've conquered this. Now let me help you.
So we wrote something in the Office of Military Affairs called the 11 General Orders of a Military-Affiliated College Student, which is loosely based on the 11 General Orders of a Sentry, which anybody who's been through any kind of basic training type scenario knows. I will walk my post in a military manner, keeping always on the alert, ... I won't go into all of them. But we've all heard those 11 General Orders of a Sentry. What we wrote was 11 General Orders of a military-affiliated college student. And one of those is that I will help other military students, other student veterans, other military spouses and dependents, that I will help those students however I can.
Yes.
And we sort of see it as there's a mandate for us to be in community, for us to help each other. We don't have to like each other. Good grief. If I tried to like all 2,100 of you, oh, wait, did I just say that out loud? Okay, hang on. I love all of you. No, but if we tried to be likable, every single one of us, to the other, we would drive ourselves crazy. However, we are all here to help one another.
Yes.
Right? And so we could all put on that t-shirt that says, your story is not over yet.
And there are different numbers that show, sometimes it's 20, sometimes it's 22, sometimes it's 25. But regardless of how many there are, there's too many veterans every day that take their own life. Chances are someone you know deals with depression, deals with thoughts like that. And the simple fact is, a kind word, whether you buy the t-shirt or not, a kind word can be all it takes to remind them, yes, I can do this. And that's the idea behind the business. That's the idea behind the shirts. There's one more that I have not bought yet that I designed that says your best days are ahead of you. Same design, same semicolon on the arm, everything like that. Sometimes when you remember, you know what, my best days are ahead of me. I haven't lived my best days. I could be 100 years old. My best days can still be ahead of me. Looking up like that can help you to overcome the depression, overcome the negative thoughts. And again, we're doing it for each other.
There's something that I will say to students sometimes. They come to me and they're like, well, I've got this going on and this going on, and I'm really stressed about this, and they're kind of starting to lose a little bit. And I'll say, okay. And we walk through some practical steps of things they can do to sort of get back on track and everything. And then I'll remind them, you have been through every hard day so far. You have lived through all the hard things so far. This is no different. You're going to live through this one too, right?
Yes.
And I went to a training. By the way, part of the reason that we are talking about all of this is because September is National Suicide Prevention Awareness Month.
Correct.
So it is a whole month that is designated to taking a look at how we as individuals and as communities and as our society work to prevent death by suicide.
Correct.
And so I went to a training here at UNCW last semester on suicidality, which I guess is the nature of people who are having suicidal thoughts and all of these things. There are people who study this in large populations, which sounds like a really grim way to spend your time. To me, it's not something I would want to do.
Exciting.
Good for them. But during that training, somebody talked about work that they were doing, and they said what we finally figured out was if you run into somebody and they're having a really rough time with whatever, you look at them and you say, hey, could you tell me one thing that doesn't suck right now?
That is a very good idea. When you focus on the positive, it makes the negative a little easier to handle.
Yeah.
One other thing, and I'm sorry to get back to this because I was thinking about this as you were talking. 2003, we were getting set to go overseas, and our brigade commander, Colonel Gass, was talking to us, and he said, I want everyone here to look to your left and look to your right. He said, I want you to remember that you're responsible for bringing that soldier home. Now, you're probably listening to this when you're driving or whatever the case may be. Wherever you are, think about the two veterans that are closest to you. That not physically closest, but the two veterans that are the closest friends. You are responsible for those two, and they're responsible for you. And when we help each other by remembering, is there anything in your life that doesn't suck right now? When we help each other by reminding each other, you can handle this. Your story is not over. However we help each other, as long as we do it, reach out, not just the person suffering. If you're not suffering, reach out to someone who is. You say, well, I don't know anyone that's suffering. Reach out anyway, because sometimes they're not telling you. Matter of fact, most of the time they're not telling you. Reach out to someone and help them through the problems that they're dealing with. Because once you reach out, then they'll tell you, oh yeah, I'm dealing with this problem. And they would never have told you if you hadn't reached out. Sorry for hijacking. Go ahead.
No, totally. This is what we're here to talk about. This actually reminds me, so one thing that we do in the Office of Military Affairs as part of the end of our orientation procedures for all of our new military-affiliated transfer students is I make phone calls after the start of the semester. And it's very simple. I call and I say, hey, this is Melanie from the Office of Military Affairs. Just calling to check in and see how things are going. And sometimes people are just like, oh yeah, everything's fine, thanks for calling. Sometimes people are really surprised that I'm calling. And then sometimes people are like, oh, hey, thanks for calling. Yeah, actually, I do have a question. Giving them the opportunity means that they're going to ask the question. But sometimes I wonder, what were you going to do with your questions if I didn't reach out and call you, right? So
Exactly.
Reaching out is step number one. There is a training at UNCW that is available to all UNCW members. It's called QPR, and it's a nationally recognized training program that trains people to do exactly what you're saying, to ask the question, how are you doing? You're telling me everything sucks right now. Can you tell me one thing that doesn't suck right now? Talking to them and asking them the question, are you thinking about hurting yourself? Are you thinking about doing something worse than hurting yourself?
Exactly.
What is in your head right now? Asking them and letting them know and being kind of specific about it and saying, hey, I recognize right now that you're at risk for this. and I'm going to help remove that risk. We're going to take care of this together. It can feel really painfully awkward to ask it, but what is that pain compared to what could happen?
Exactly. That is an awkwardness that I have outgrown. I don't deal with that as much anymore. And people that I've asked this question of, and I'm thinking of a few specifically, they know that once they give me an indication that they're considering self-harm, I'm not going to back down until I know they're safe. I've been there. I've done that. Thank goodness I'm still here. Maybe they won't be that lucky. And I'm not going to back down. Once you tell me that there's something wrong, we're going to talk about it. And people know that. Sometimes it's annoying. I've been told I'm annoying. I will deal with that. That's good. But as long as you know that you've got someone you can talk to.
Yes. I would much rather be told that, like, you're annoying and stay out of my business than feel like I left that opportunity unturned, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah. And obviously the follow-on steps for that are to persuade someone to go seek additional help and then to give them an appropriate referral. And a referral does not mean, oh, you should call the such and such hotline, although those hotlines are there for a reason. It might be calling on their behalf. It might be calling for them. It might be escorting them somewhere, picking them up in the car and taking them somewhere. Doing all the things that you very matter-of-factly, very calmly are like, yep, no, this is how we are going to handle this. And there is something refreshing about that attitude of we don't have to get super, like, cerebral and touchy-feely about this. Like, self-harm is a physical thing. We can talk about that in physical terms, and we can say, okay,
yes,
this is what's going to happen. I'm going to do X, Y, and Z for you, and you're going to come along with me and do this.
And for people who are not anywhere close to me, I have called for a health and welfare check on them from the local police department. I've had people get very angry with me because I've done that. I don't care. I'm going to make sure you're okay.
Yeah. These are such grim, awful things to have to talk about. But as you mentioned, the statistic hovers somewhere around 22 deaths by suicide in the veteran community per day. That's not, I mean, it's unfathomable, really. It's hard to understand that number.
I try not to think about the big numbers. One thing that a former pastor said to me, you take care of the one in front of you. The big numbers will take care of themselves if you take care of the one that's in front of you. And that's the reason, going back to the T-shirts, going back to that individual message, it's a message to one person. That's the idea behind talking to people one-on-one. It's a message to one person. Take care of the one person in front of you, and then big numbers will take care of themselves.
And again, ladies and gentlemen, this is why James McNeil is such a wonderful motivational speaker. He can wrap everything together very nicely like that. And just so you know, if you want to hear more from James, he's going to be the speaker at our Veterans Day celebration, which will be on Monday, November 11th here at UNCW. So the last question for you, James, is where do you think you'll go from here?
Well, as you said, I will be speaking at the Veterans Day. I'm also open to speak to classes on campus, and I'm wanting to get back to being a full-time motivational speaker. Once I graduate, which is next May, thank goodness.
About time.
It's about time. But once I graduate, I do plan on taking the experience that I've got as a speaker, the degree that I'm earning with a business administration with concentration in leadership, and going to civic organizations, to churches, to businesses, to help people to understand that this is something that touches every walk of life. Sean Douglas is his name. He calls it resilience training. We can call it that. I call it saving lives, one at a time. And that's what I want to do, is to go and to share that message throughout America, if not further.
Again, it is good to have ambitions and lofty ones.
Exactly. Now, that's a lofty ambition.
Something tells me it's going to work out for you.
I'm too stubborn for it not to work out.
That's pretty much what was telling me that it's going to work out for you. All right. Well, thank you for listening to this episode of the Military Seahawk podcast. We look forward to seeing you again.